Hi, so today I want to discuss human gods. A lot of various religions, both past and present, include the idea that human beings can be gods. For example, the Dalai Lama is considered to be, well, not directly a god, he is considered to be divine. And you have within Buddhism, you have several people who are considered to be um, the reincarnations of gods. And I guess everybody has heard about the child goddesses of, I think that is Hinduism. And yeah, within Hinduism, it's pretty common concept that various deities incarnate again and again and again as human beings. Christianity is based around this concept as well, with uh, with um, Jesus being both a god and a man. And Shintoism, for example, are um, based around ancestor worship, which is worshipping your various ancestors as if they were gods. One can also mention saints, which were normal human beings, but which were considered so blessed and so pious that they have gained divine properties. And many Catholics, while you're not supposed to technically worship the saints, they do pray to them. So, but when you look at paganism, and then especially, like for example, the Greek, Roman, Norse, and Egyptian pantheons that a lot of modern pagans have adopted, and you bring up the concept of the various historical figures who at their time were considered to be gods of this pantheon, you just get people looking at you strangely like, what are you talking about? And I find that a bit strange, because we are adopting a pantheon, and while some people who are, for example, Wiccan, pagan, practice witchcraft, and so on, look at the gods as more concepts, or as faces for the goddess and the god, many of us do think the gods are real, that Aphrodite is real, that Osiris is real, that Thor is real, and are powerful beings out there somewhere who can hear our prayers. Why then have we cherry-picked which deities from these pantheons that we will give credence to? Back when the Egyptian pantheon, for example, were practiced, it was believed that the pharaohs were gods. They were god kings. They were the reincarnations of Horus, and many of the other priests and royals were considered to be divine in their own right. That they were, like with Jesus, spiritual beings in physical bodies walking the earth, and long after their death, they were worshipped. Like, for example, Cleopatra was considered to be a goddess, and so was actually her daughter, Selene. Now, Selene wasn't part of the Egyptian pantheon because she was when Caesar took and crushed Cleopatra and her forces. He took her children with him to Rome, where Selene grew up, but she was married off, and many prayed to her. They thought she was a goddess. And the point of this video, I guess, is asking various whoever might watch this, what your ideas around this is. Do you include the human gods in your worship? For me, I must admit I haven't really considered this a lot, but lately I have felt the need of including these deities in my worship when I work with these pantheons, because they were very much a part of those religions. So that you may pray to the various forms of Egyptian gods, but I don't think it's right to forget the various pharaohs and their queens, who were also gods by that religious philosophy. And you had the same concept in both the Greek and the Roman religions, and you also had it to a lesser extent with the Norse religion. For example, the gods in the Norse religion were considered to actually be people. The idea was less that the gods were spiritual beings than they were a race, or actually two races, because, for example, Freya is not an Asir. She is what is the name in English? Vanir. So you had several clans of these powerful beings, and they were more considered to be just great people, and the same would be with some chieftains and those that really gained a reputation for being great men would be considered to be in many ways divine. And for me, I think it's important to remember these various personas and make homages to them just as you would any other god, because one thing is if you have the approach that all gods are just faces of the god and all goddesses are just faces of the goddess, and the various distinct gods are just, how should I put it? They're just handles. They are ways to understand this very esoteric, very mysterious force, just a male and a female force, and it is easier for our human minds to understand them if we can think of them as people with names and appearances. If that's your idea, then I guess it's okay to skip whatever gods within a pantheon that doesn't speak to you. However, if you, for example, are Hellenist, is that the right word for it? If you practice the Greek-Roman religion, I think that then you should embrace the entire religion, and that includes the idea of human gods. And within the Egyptian religion, for example, this is even more prevalent, where all of their rulers were considered to be gods. In fact, the pharaoh was very much the center of and the highest leader of Egyptian spiritual life, because he was considered to be Horus on earth, and every pharaoh had shrines to him, and they were worshipped as gods even after their death. And I think that it's important not to forget that, because while the concept might be a bit strange to us today, I think that when you sort of accept an old religion, you have to accept some of the worldviews of that. Not all of them, of course, because a lot of the morality that you can find in ancient societies would not go very well with the morality of today. I don't think that you should begin acting as an old Roman or an old Greek, but that you, for as much as possible, should adopt a lot of the worldview and all of the religion instead of cherry picking it if you are going with dedicating yourself to one pantheon. And this leads me sort of into the concept of what is a god. And I think that is a concept which is very floating, because if you ask someone of one religion what a god is, they will give you another answer than the next person, because it is very hard to define exactly what is a god. And like I said, the Norse had a completely different idea of what a god is than, for example, Christians have. The gods in Norse mythology, for example, is not all powerful. They are extremely powerful and definitely not to be trifled with, and they have power over life and creation, but they are not all powerful. They have a beginning. They're immortal, but there are ways to destroy them, and they are very much people. While, for example, many pagans view gods as energy, and for many in many of the time periods in old Egypt, the gods were seen as nether, which translates as concepts. They were archetypes, so that, for example, Osiris was the archetype of the lord of the underworld, the king of the gods, and so on, and he was not necessarily seen as a persona in itself as much as a divine personification of that concept. So various cultures, various religions have had various ideas of what a god is. Now, I'm a chaot, so my paradigm does change. But to me, I think that my idea of a god is a very powerful being. And I think that is sort of it. Usually if I go in to call something a god, it will have to have some sort of power over the earth itself, over creation, being tied into the world in another way than most normal beings have. But a powerful being with the power of nature, if you will, to me is a god. Which of course would mean that, yes, let's say there came a highly advanced society from another planet who used technology and had technology to the point that they could control life and nature in the same way. To me, they would be gods. Now there's a spiritual element, but to me the spiritual element of religion very much comes from me, while a god is a focus for that spiritual idea. And therefore I don't see a problem with human gods, people who are either so connected to that pantheon and their gods, have received their blessings, and so on, that they have that power, then they would be gods. I also think that, to a very big degree, worshippers make the gods, so that when somebody is worshipped, whether or not they began with that power, I think the concept of that persona then gained the power of a god. And I think this is also true for example, made-up gods or fictional element. Like, let's say we had a cult of Mickey Mouse, and enough people worship this fictional character, then eventually the concept, the energy around that fictional idea would become so powerful that it could be rightfully called a god. And I remember that one of the first lessons my teacher gave me was to make gods. I was to make a pantheon for me to worship in my pagan rituals. And to me they became gods because to me a god is a concept of power. So yeah, that means that, to bring it back to the original idea of my video and not just spread it around, because I think I will make another video at a later point with more about what exactly a god is, then to me I don't see a problem with something that has been born as a human being a god. And I think that in many ways the human gods can be easier for us as human beings to understand, and I also think that it's more easy for them to understand us. So I think that for some, especially earthly requests, as praying to, for example, Cleopatra or Tutankhamun or Selene, the daughter of Cleopatra, and so on, might give easier connection and make it easier for them to understand the request than them praying to a more esoteric god, like, for example, Yahweh. Not that I'm saying one is better than the other, but I'm saying that what was once human, I would imagine have a greater ease in understanding the human condition, and vice versa. So yes, that's my thought about it. I think that if you are practicing a particular pantheon, you should include all the gods in that pantheon, including the human gods. So if you are practicing the Egyptian pantheon, then it is natural to include the pharaohs, and so on with the Greek and the Roman and the Norse and so on. And I think that if you sit down and think about it, it's not such a far-fetched concept, with people, flesh and blood people, who are either incarnated gods or have the blessing of the gods to such a degree that they become gods themselves. And I think they have a place, and a very important place, in a pantheon that includes several gods and their worship. Okay, have a great day, and blessed be.